Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're actually heading back into the world we first explored in our deep dive on fallenphoenixcomplete.pdf.
Yeah, that's right.
We're not exactly moving forward in the main plot just yet. Instead, we're sort of circling back to a really unforgettable scene from late in chapter 8.
That scene, yes.
It's a moment that, might not be a huge plot driver in the grand scheme of things, but it is absolutely brimming with character revelations, some unexpected humor, and it really gives us a deeper look into the dynamics of our core trio.
Exactly. You can think of this as like a bonus deep dive. We're really zooming in on a specific sequence. It happens right after Anastasia arrives at the penthouse, following those really intense events that brought her there from the tower.
Right.
It's maybe just a few pages in the source material, but it's so tactful of detail and, frankly, surprising moments that it definitely warrants its own focused exploration.
Yeah.
It shows us who these characters are, particularly Phoenix, in a way that sometimes the major plot points can't quite capture.
Totally agree. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. Walk you through the specific rooftop sparring scene. It's Phoenix and Rachael, and Anastasia stumbles upon them. We want to unpack the comedic layers, which are definitely there.
Oh, yeah?
The genuine emotional responses, the evolving character dynamics, and maybe most importantly, what this really bizarre encounter tells us about Phoenix's unique nature and, the reality Anastasia is now stepping into.
Mm-hmm. And we've got the source material right here. Gives us a really detailed play-by-play of this specific morning. So yeah, let's explore every beat of it.
It's definitely a scene that sticks with you. It paints such a vivid, almost surreal picture.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
So let's settle in and explore what happens when Anastasia's first morning in this strange new home leads her up to the penthouse rooftop.
Okay, let's dive in. So the source material puts us right after this huge upheaval for Anastasia. She spent her first night at Phoenix's penthouse, which is, a massive change from the tower where she lived and worked.
Huge change, yeah.
The text tells us she wakes up alone, and she's actually in Phoenix's spacious room. How would you describe her state of mind right then, considering everything that just went down?
Well, she's got to be in a state of disorientation, right? And probably still processing the sheer trauma of her escape from the tower, waking up alone in this huge, opulent room belonging to a stranger. I mean, even if that stranger is Phoenix, her rescuer, it would be incredibly jarring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the source gives us these little specific details about the room, like the paintings of the sky, this cabinet filled with swords. These aren't just random bits of description. They feel like subtle cues. They're showing Anastasia and us, pieces of Phoenix's inner world, hinting at his nature, maybe his history, just through the environment he's created.
That's a great point.
She's not just in a room. She's kind of navigating the first signs of his personality, his interests, maybe even his vulnerabilities, represented by these things like swords and paintings. It's this moment of quiet almost before the real weirdness starts. The setting itself is already telling us something about the person whose protection she's under.
Right. And in this moment of relative quiet, the silence gets broken. The source says she hears this unusual noise, a distinct clanging sound, coming from the rooftop. What does that sound signify? Why does it push her to act?
Well, the noise is jarring, isn't it? It's totally out of place. Metal hitting metal. It suggests activity, maybe conflict, or just really intense effort. For someone who just escaped a super dangerous situation, any unexpected sound is going to put her on high alert immediately.
Makes sense.
It's disruptive, and it's inherently mysterious. Why is there a clanging on a penthouse rooftop early in the morning? Her reaction, deciding to investigate, it isn't just like idle curiosity.
Yeah.
It feels like it's born from the heightened tension of her new reality. She's been thrown into this world of danger and unpredictability, and this sound is just another unknown that she feels she has to understand.
And the source connects the sound directly to Phoenix through a small but really important observation she makes. What does she notice that kind of confirms her suspicion about where the noise is coming from?
She notices that one of the swords is missing from that cabinet in Phoenix's room.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's classic storytelling, right? Yep. Connecting these separate pieces. The clanging sound, the missing sword, it immediately points towards Phoenix. It suggests whatever's happening up there involves him and, his world. It's a moment where Anastasia, even though she's totally new to this environment, she starts putting the pieces together. It shows her inherent intelligence, her observational skills. She's actively trying to make sense of her surroundings, not just like passively waiting for things to happen.
That's a good point.
This small act, just noticing the missing sword, It's a subtle sign of her growing agency, maybe her determination to understand the completely bizarre circumstances she's landed in. It feels like her first conscious step towards really engaging with the reality of Phoenix's life, instead of just being swept along by events.
So, armed with this observation, she decides to investigate. She heads towards the rooftop stairs, moving from the, relative safety, even if it is strange safety of the apartment, into the unknown. What does this decision tell us about her character right at this point?
I think it shows a mix, really. There's apprehension, for sure, but also courage. She knows there's unusual activity, possibly dangerous activity, involving someone as enigmatic and, frankly, powerful as Phoenix. Yet, she chooses to confront it. Maybe it's concern for Phoenix, given his recent injuries, maybe. Or perhaps it's a kind of burgeoning sense of responsibility for her own safety and understanding. Or, maybe it's just that basic human drive to figure things out.
Could be any of those, yeah.
Whatever the main reason, it's clear she's not just going to hide away. She's taking initiative, stepping towards potential discomfort or danger. And that's crucial for her development throughout the whole story, right? She's shifting from being sort of a victim of circumstance to someone actively trying to navigate this new crazy reality.
So she goes up the stairs, the clanging gets louder, her anticipation is probably building. And when she finally reaches the rooftop, the scene she finds is, well, anything but ordinary. Can you describe what greets Anastasia's eyes?
Yeah, it's a scene of intense but highly unconventional combat training. She finds Phoenix and Rachael and they're engaged in sparring, but the immediate visual is just startling because of the conditions Phoenix has put himself under. This isn't just like a regular practice session.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, right? And sets the tone for Phoenix's character in such a big way. What are the specific, extraordinary handicaps Phoenix is operating under during the spar?
The source lays it out really vividly. He is completely blindfolded.
Blindfolded. Wow.
Yep. And he has one arm tied securely behind his back.
One arm, too. Okay.
And he's using that missing sword, the one Anastasia noticed was gone from his cabinet. So picture this. Phoenix, blindfolded, basically fighting one-handed with a real sword against Rachael, who we know is a highly capable fighter herself.
Definitely.
And this is all happening on a rooftop. It's just an immediate striking image that tells you so much about Phoenix's comfort level with danger and his capabilities.
Blindfolded, one arm tied, sparring with a live blade against someone like Rachael. And the source describes the sharp sound of metal hitting metal, really emphasizing the intensity, the reality of this spar. What does this tell us about Phoenix's skill level? I mean, this isn't just practice. It feels like a demonstration of something profound.
Oh, it speaks to an almost unbelievable level of combat mastery. And spatial awareness, right? To engage effectively in sword combat while you can't see and you're significantly physically restrained, that takes more than just skill. It suggests innate talent, maybe intuition, perhaps even abilities beyond the norm that let him compensate.
Right.
The fact that he's not just surviving the spar, but actively participating, metal clanging against metal, proves that shows he's pushing himself. Or maybe just maintaining a level of readiness under conditions designed to make failure almost certain for anyone else.
Yeah, failure or serious injury.
Exactly. It immediately establishes him as someone operating on a completely different plane when it comes to combat.
Yeah.
He's not just proficient, he's demonstrating a mastery that borders on the superhuman, really. Even before we get to his more obvious, explicit powers. It tells you he thrives under pressure, seeks out challenges, even once he imposes on himself.
So Anastasia is just standing there, taking in this utterly bizarre scene, the clanging, the handicaps, the sheer intensity. And then Phoenix, somehow, in the middle of this incredibly focused, dangerous activity, completely blindfolded, he senses she's there and it completely shatters the tension with the most unexpected reaction.
Yes. And this is such a quintessential Phoenix moment. It's perfect. Despite being blindfolded, actively sparring, he immediately recognizes Anastasia is there. And he addresses her with the most casual, almost irreverent tone. He doesn't stop the spar with alarm or anything. He just pauses with curiosity.
Right, and his greeting, the source quotes it, is just hilariously mundane given the context. He casually asks her how she slept. What does this seemingly totally out-of-place question reveal about him?
It reveals his incredible ability to, compartmentalize? Or maybe it's just his genuine lack of concern for the immediate physical danger he's in. It's wild.
Yeah.
While most people would be entirely focused on, not being sliced by a sword, Phoenix's attention just shifts to his guest's comfort. It establishes his surprisingly lighthearted demeanor, his social awareness even when he's physically impaired, and just his fundamental nature as someone who doesn't take even potentially life-threatening situations with grim seriousness.
It's amazing.
It feels like a deliberate choice, maybe, to diffuse the visual intensity of the scene with just domestic normalcy. And it completely catches both Rachael and Anastasia totally off guard. It shows he's aware of Anastasia, and in his own really strange way, he's extending a form of, like, hospitality or concern.
And then, just compounding the unexpectedness, he makes this offer to Anastasia that seems utterly reckless, especially given what happened the night before. The source says he suddenly offers to take her back to the tower to retrieve her belongings.
Yeah, this offer is, frankly, baffling. From a logical standpoint, anyway. Anastasia has just escaped the tower under extremely violent circumstances. It involved Agent Frank, heavily armed security.
Right, it wasn't a quiet exit.
Not at all. The tower is clearly a hostile environment for her now. And likely for Phoenix, too, especially after he helped her escape. For him to just casually suggest they, pop back over there? It's either a display of supreme, almost arrogant overconfidence in his abilities, or maybe a fundamental misunderstanding of the danger. Or maybe it's a deliberate test, or a distraction technique.
Interesting possibilities.
Whatever his reason, it's a proposition just dripping with potential peril.
Right. And it's the sheer risk involved that makes it so surprising, especially to Rachael. Why is this specific offer the point where Rachael interjects so forcefully?
Okay, this is where Rachel's really fierce protective streak towards Anastasia just bursts out, right? She knows the tower, she knows Agent Frank's capabilities, his resources, she knows the level of threat Anastasia is under. Phoenix's offer to just go back. It's not just reckless, it's potentially suicidal for Anastasia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Rachael immediately recognizes the extreme danger and just reacts with, like, vehemence. She overrides the spar, the weird atmosphere, everything. The source really emphasizes she objects immediately and emphatically. Says it's too dangerous to go back. This isn't just a mild disagreement. It's a firm, non-negotiable boundary. And it feels like it's drawn out of genuine concern for Anastasia's safety. It really solidifies her role as a protector figure for Anastasia within this unusual household.
And what's interesting is how Anastasia responds here. She doesn't automatically just defer to Phoenix, even though he's her rescuer and, the powerful figure here. The source notes she actually agrees with Rachael and even adds her own reasoning. What does her agreement signify about her state of mind, her development?
Her response here is really crucial, I think, for showing her growth. Just a short time ago, Anastasia was pretty much reactive, right? Caught up in everything happening around her in the tower. Now she's actively assessing the situation herself. She's drawing on her own recent, very traumatic experiences. When Phoenix makes his offer, she doesn't blindly accept it. She weighs the risks. She acknowledges the reality of Agent Frank's determination and, the likely increased security at the tower. Now, her agreement with Rachael, she says something like, I agree with you there. I'm sure Agent Frank is doing everything in his power to put up extra security. It shows she's thinking for herself.
Yeah.
It shows she understands the severity of her situation, and she's capable of making reasoned judgments about danger. It's a real moment of self-awareness and agency. She's aligning herself with a more cautious perspective, which in this case is definitely Rachel's.
Now, the episode focus also mentioned that this scene, especially when you look at it alongside other parts of the source material, might hint at a layer of jealousy in Rachel's protectiveness towards Anastasia. How does the source, maybe here and elsewhere, subtly suggest that complexity?
Yeah, it's important to be careful here. In this exact moment on the rooftop, Rachel's reaction reads primarily as protective concern for Anastasia's safety. That's the most obvious and probably strongest motivation right then. However, when you look across Chapter 8, and maybe even beyond, the source does sprinkle in these little moments that allow for a, let's say, a different interpretation, adds layers to her character. Remember later, maybe it's still in Chapter 8, after Anastasia is settled in a bit more. There's that quiet mumble from Rachael about Anastasia sleeping outside on the balcony.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It seems like a throwaway line, right? But it could hint at a slight resentment, maybe, or possessiveness over the space, or perhaps over Phoenix's attention within that space. Then there's a physical action described later in the source, maybe not immediately after this scene, but connected to the lingering effects. Rachael is described tightening Phoenix's bandage while he's teasing Anastasia about something. It's subtle, but it could be read as a nonverbal expression of disapproval, maybe frustration directed at Phoenix's focus on Anastasia.
Interesting nuance.
So, while the rooftop objection is clearly about safety first and foremost, those other moments, combined with the sheer intensity of her reaction here to Phoenix offering to help Anastasia, It opens the door to the possibility that her strong feelings for Anastasia's well-being are maybe tangled up with her own complex feelings about Phoenix and about Anastasia entering his life. It's not overt, not spelled out, but it's there for you to read into. Adds fascinating depth to this forming trio. She cares for Anastasia, definitely, but she might also be navigating feelings of rivalry or just discomfort over Phoenix's engagement with this new person.
That complexity is really key, isn't it? Makes them feel real. So they're having this tense discussion about going back to the Tower Phoenix, all casual, Rachael emphatic, Anastasia thoughtful, and this is happening right after, or maybe during, a momentary pause in the spar. Phoenix is still blindfolded, still restrained, and then the source describes Rachael reacting, perhaps still keyed up from the sparring or maybe the interruption.
Exactly. The source notes Phoenix had put his sword down, just temporarily, but maybe still processing the abrupt shift in conversation, or perhaps just by instinct after the pause. Rachael makes a move, and this move leads directly to the scene's utterly shocking climax.
And what happens next is, well, it's hard to believe, even in a world that has people like Phoenix in it. Describe the result of Rachael's action.
The source is incredibly stark
Yeah.
and graphic in his description. Rachael lands a blow, and it's not just a hit, not a minor wound. It's described as a slash that literally cuts Phoenix in half.
In half, like across the torso.
Across the torso, sliced completely in two.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. It's a moment of just extreme physical trauma, and it's described with this blunt force by the source material. The visual is immediate and horrifying. One half of Phoenix's body is now separated from the other. The author definitely plays this for maximum shock value, contrasting that preceding casual conversation with this sudden, brutal physical event. It's absolutely a scene designed to make you gasp.
And what makes it even more jarring, right, is the immediate state of Phoenix after this catastrophic injury. Unlike any normal human being, he isn't immediately collapsing or screaming or dying in agony.
That's the crucial pivot point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The physical damage is absolute, fatal by any conventional standard. Yet Phoenix's state isn't one of immediate incapacitation or suffering, not in the way you'd expect at all. And this sets the stage for the truly bizarre demonstration of his abilities that follows.
So Phoenix is literally in two pieces on the rooftop. What are Anastasia and Rachael's immediate reactions to witnessing this impossible event?
Well, pretty much as you'd expect from anyone seeing something like that, their reactions are extreme shock and panic. Anastasia, who's already reeling from everything else and now confronted with this impossible visual, she faints, just straight up faints on the spot.
Understandable.
And Rachael, even though she knows Phoenix has regenerative abilities, she's clearly pushed past her limits here. The source describes her panicking, actually tearing up at the sight of Phoenix being cut in half. It shows that just knowing about his resilience doesn't negate the horror of actually witnessing such profound physical damage to someone she clearly cares about. Her panic is this raw human response that really underscores the severity of the injury, even if it turns out to be temporary for Phoenix.
But while the women are reacting with understandable horror, Phoenix's response is, well, the absolute opposite.
And this is where his unique personality just shines through, doesn't it? In the weirdest possible way. Instead of focusing on his own bisected state or the women's distress, his immediate reaction is to inject levity. He turns this horrific scene into a setup for a joke.
The source quotes him making a darkly humorous observation about Anastasia fainting, right? Something like, she went down when the top half of me fell off the bottom half, right?
Exactly that. It's morbid, it's absurd, and it's entirely characteristic of Phoenix. He's using humor as an immediate coping mechanism, maybe, or perhaps it's a way to manage the reactions of the people around him. By cracking a joke about his own dismemberment, he's signaling that this, while visually shocking, isn't actually as dire for him as it appears to them.
Right.
He's actively working to diffuse the situation with comedy, even while literally cut in half. It's such a powerful demonstration of his emotional resilience, or perhaps his detachment from conventional physical vulnerability. It's just wild.
And then comes the actual demonstration of his regenerative abilities, which the source describes in a way that is both incredible and completely surreal. Walk us through how Phoenix actually puts himself back together.
Yeah, this isn't just like rapid healing of tissue like you might expect.
Yeah.
The source details a truly bizarre reassembly process. His severed top half, lying there separately, is described as crawling towards a vent on the rooftop.
Crawling. His torso.
His torso crawling.
Oh.
Meanwhile, his legs, detached, are described as walking over to rejoin him. Walking legs.
Okay.
And Phoenix himself frames the reconnection in the most casual, almost domestic terms imaginable. He describes putting his legs back on, like a pair of pants.
Like a pair of
Like a
pants.
pair of pants. And the rejoining is then completed with this visual flourish, a ring of fire, that apparently seals the two halves back together.
That image putting his legs on like pants, it's simultaneously horrifying and strangely comical. What does this incredibly vivid, if totally surreal description tell us about the nature of Phoenix's regenerative powers? Something we might not have fully grasped before.
Well, it reveals that his regeneration isn't just, accelerated cellular repair. It seems to be a fundamental restructuring of his physical form,
Right.
allowing for reassembly even from complete severing. The crawling torso, the walking legs, they aren't just passive body parts in this description. They seem to possess some degree of independent function or maybe a homing instinct. And describing it like putting on pants, it totally demystifies the grotesque reality of being cut in half, framing it in terms of this mundane, everyday action.
Yeah.
Which just reinforces Phoenix's casual attitude towards his own body's peculiarities. It shows his resilience isn't just about healing cuts or bruises. It's about literally being able to be broken into pieces and put back together again. And seemingly without significant lingering pain or effort, beyond maybe the initial shock, it fundamentally changes your understanding of his physical existence, doesn't it? How profoundly different he is from a normal human. It pushes the boundary of what regeneration even means.
And his humor doesn't stop with that initial joke about Anastasia fainting. The source gives us a couple more examples of his quips, even while he's undergoing or immediately after this bizarre reassembly.
Yes, it just keeps reinforcing his personality, doesn't it? He cracks jokes like, see, when the pressure's on, I can really pull myself together.
Oh my gosh.
An obvious terrible pun on his physical state, and you can really bring a guy down to half his size, referring to Rachael Slash. These lines, delivered right after being literally cut in two, they just highlight this deep-seated tendency towards dark humor. It shows that even facing extreme physical violation, his immediate response is levity. It really begs the question, which we can maybe circle back to, like, is this genuine nonchalance? Is it a coping mechanism he's developed over God knows how long? Or is it something else entirely? But in the moment, it just serves to underscore his incredible resilience, not just physically, but seemingly emotionally or mentally too.
So this utterly bizarre, traumatic for the women, yet strangely comedic event has just unfolded on the rooftop. How does this shared extraordinary experience impact and maybe solidify the dynamic between Phoenix, Rachael, and Anastasia?
I think it's a really defining moment for the trio, actually.
Yeah.
For Rachael, her initial panic and tears, they quickly transition to light laughter because Phoenix jokes pull her out of it.
Yeah.
This illustrates the strength of their existing bond, right? She knows him well enough that even the horror of seeing him bisected can be mitigated by his familiar, absurd humor. It's like a shared understanding of his unique nature.
Yeah.
For Anastasia, while she reacted with immediate shock, fainting, the fact that the source notes she later confirms the event happened with both Phoenix and Rachael is significant. She can't just dismiss it as a weird dream or something. This event forces her to confront the fundamental reality of Phoenix's existence, that he operates under completely different rules of physics and biology than she does. Witnessing him get cut in half and then joke about it. It's a jarring, undeniable introduction to the true strangeness and resilience of his world.
And circling back quickly to Rachel's complex feelings, her protectiveness, that potential jealousy, how does the aftermath of this scene and maybe those later moments the source hints at tie into that?
Well, Rachel's panic is a clear sign of genuine care, right? She reacts with horror for Phoenix's well-being, even if her intellect tells her he'll probably be fine. But then, you see that interplay with her more complicated emotions. The source mentioning Rachael physically tightening Phoenix's bandage later while he's maybe teasing Anastasia about sleeping in his room or something. That physical act is potent. It reads like a nonverbal expression of frustration, maybe even passive aggression. She could really yell at him for being himself or for paying attention to Anastasia, so she physically manifests her irritation by being a bit rougher than necessary while tending to the, lingering effects of his injury.
Oh.
It shows how these layered emotions, care, frustration, maybe a low-level rivalry, they coexist within her character. And they manifest in these really subtle ways, adding depth to her relationship with both Phoenix and Anastasia.
So let's try and distill this scene down. What are the key takeaways, the essential nuggets of knowledge about each of these three characters that we gain specifically from this one rooftop encounter?
Okay. For Phoenix, it's a profound deepening of our understanding of his regenerative abilities. We see they extend to complete physical severance and reassembly, way beyond simple healing. We also witness his truly exceptional combat skill, showcased by his ability to spar effectively under those extreme handicaps. And maybe most importantly, we see his core personality laid bare. His deep-seated, sometimes morbid sense of humor, his incredibly casual attitude towards physical harm, and surprisingly his warmth and attention towards Anastasia, offering to help her despite the obvious dangers involved.
Okay, that's Phoenix. And for Rachael?
For Rachael, we see her fierce, undeniable protectiveness towards Anastasia really come to the fore. It establishes her as a vital figure in Anastasia's safety net. We also see her capacity for genuine panic and vulnerability under extreme stress, which contrasts nicely with her usual tough exterior. The scene highlights the complex dynamic she has with Phoenix, that mix of sparring partner, caretaker, and someone whose moods she's deeply attuned to. Yeah. And yeah, we get those intriguing hints of jealousy or maybe possessiveness that add significant layers to her character and her place in this emerging trio.
Right. And finally, what about Anastasia? What does the scene reveal about her at this point?
This is really Anastasia's stark introduction to the true, bizarre reality of Phoenix's world. It reveals her initial, understandable unfamiliarity and shock when she's confronted with abilities that just defy her understanding of physics and biology, leading to her literally fainting.
Yeah.
But it also shows her developing self-awareness and her ability to assess danger independently, which we see in her reasoned agreement with Rachael about the tower. And most significantly, witnessing this event forces her to begin grappling with just how fundamentally strange and unpredictable Phoenix is. It forces her to adapt her whole worldview to accommodate his existence.
It's really quite remarkable, isn't it? As we discussed, how much character development, dynamic building, and even world exposition is packed into this single, relatively short scene. Why do you think this rooftop sparring session, even though it doesn't necessarily drive a major plot point forward, is so revealing and important for understanding these characters and the story overall?
I think it's because it strips away all the external pressures for a moment, the missions, the villains, the grand schemes, and it focuses intensely on the internal reality of this group. It's a shared moment of extreme absurdity, potential trauma, and weird humor that actually accelerates their bond. It forces a level of honesty both in the raw reactions and in the unavoidable revelation of Phoenix's true nature.
That makes sense.
It's like a concentrated dose of the series' core tone, blending the bizarre, the dangerous, the humorous, and the deeply human. Or in Phoenix's case, deeply other elements. It's a scene that really crystallizes who they are, individually and together, outside the context of a fight or a mission. It's pure character interaction, forged in the crucible of the impossible, really.
Or it's definitely a scene that lingers long after you read it, precisely because of how visually striking and utterly characteristic of Phoenix it is. From the initial weirdness of the blindfolded spar to the jaw-dropping, pants-wearing regeneration.
Absolutely. It's an image that just defines the unique reality of this story. It's unforgettable.
So we've walked through Anastasia's disoriented morning, her investigation leading her upstairs, the bizarre sparring setup she finds, Phoenix's casual interruption, and that reckless offer. Rachael and Anastasia's reactions, rooted in concern and growing awareness, then the shocking, impossible injury, and finally, Phoenix's darkly humorous, surreal regeneration. We've seen how the single, unforgettable moment really solidifies the unique dynamic between the trio and reveals core truths about each of them.
Yeah, it's a perfect demonstration of that show don't tell principle, isn't it? Using a really heightened dramatic moment to convey deep character traits and even some world rules.
Exactly. And it leaves you, the listener, with a lot to ponder, I think. Considering Phoenix's ability to treat such extreme physical trauma being literally cut in half with such apparent humor and casualness, what does that truly imply about his past experiences?
Right.
What kind of life has he lived? What kind of pain or destruction has he witnessed or maybe endured himself? That this level of physical violation is something he can crack jokes about and just casually put back together. What does that say about his perception of life and death? Or perhaps what's the hidden mental or emotional toll of living with such profound reality-bending resilience, always being able to, quote, pull himself together?
That casual attitude. It could be a shield, couldn't it?
Yeah.
A coping mechanism built up over potentially centuries of unimaginable past events. Or it could be a genuine reflection of a being whose relationship with physical integrity and mortality is just fundamentally alien to ours. It's a really fascinating question, and it colors pretty much every one of his interactions and actions throughout the source material. Definitely something for you, the listener, to consider as you explore his story further.
A powerful question indeed. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a truly unforgettable scene from Fallen Phoenix Complete.pdf. It's moments like these, packed with surprising detail and character insight that make revisiting the source material so rewarding.
Always a pleasure to unpack these unique moments with you. They really stick with you.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.